Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Bonzert of Radio Retro Future, and I had a hell of a day today. For some reason, it's one of those days that everybody all of a sudden decides to argue with everybody else. Who's to blame? I don't know, but it's weird. Fortunately, it does not really affect me, so that's the only benefit I get out of this. However, despite that, I did get some work done today on a future video I'm working on, and also we went to see a Battle Angel I wanted to say Battle Angel Lolita. No, I think there is one of those, but no, this is Battle Angel Alita. That's right. So, it's a pretty obscure title here, I would say, here in the West in general. It was, when I heard about this a couple of years ago, they were going to make a Battle Angel Alita movie. I was like, really? And by no other than James Cameron, which surprised me even more. But yeah, he seems to have a real passion for this story, or this manga. Now, for those who are not familiar with Battle Angel Alita, it's a manga from, I think, the late 80s, early 90s. And I was quite into manga and anime during high school. And we shared a lot of anime and mangas with friends. Digitally, mostly, because it was extremely hard to get manga here in Europe. And, well, a matter of fact, still is. It's really expensive. So yeah, you can get it easily. It's still very expensive. And Battle Angel Alita itself has, like, I think at least 3 series. There's the original Battle Angel Alita, then there's I think it was a short series, Battle Angel Mars Chronicles, and then there was Battle Angel Alita Lost Order, which is wonderfully a 90s cheese. But yeah, of course, also you can expect it to be ultra violent, very gory. And then you hear that James Cameron is gonna direct a CGI version. Well, it's not entirely CGI, but mostly CGI version of Battle Angel Alita, which I thought was very peculiar, but I couldn't help to be very curious, because this seems to be something he really, really wanted to do very badly. So, what was my experience going in as both, well, I wouldn't say a fan of the series, but I do. It is one of the first anime I watched. There's also an animated version of this, which I greatly, well, not so much. It existed. It was new at the time. We weren't used to this kind of thing. So back then, for me, Battle Angel Alita was very special. I don't know if I would enjoy it as much as I would have enjoyed it back then. The animation quality wasn't even that great back then to begin with. So yeah, but what did James Cameron do with it? Well, first off, the movie looks just marvelous. The animation is top notch. The cyborgs in this world, they all feel they have weight. You know, you could hear the clanking, you could see objects moving under the weight of these things, and when one of them got, like, crushed spectacularly, you actually felt like that's a big lump of metal getting crushed right there, and it was all very well executed and timed. So I was, like, sitting like this, staring at the screen, tense throughout the entire movie, throughout every action scene. So yeah, top notch as far as the action goes. So there's that. Now, as far as the story, it is very true to Battle Angel Alita. It's not that complex a story. It's one of those weird post-apocalyptic worlds. Let's start there. That is, like, truly dystopian, especially in the manga. I thought it was a bit downplayed in the movie, but we'll talk a little bit more about it later. Like, truly dystopian, horrific, cyborgs everywhere, people living in squalor, and above all this terrible, terrible existence, there is this floating city called Salem, and, you know, it's essentially essentially their version of Elysium. That's essentially it. It's like, of course, this upper tier society, and, well, everyone wants to go there. Problem is, the only way to get to Salem, officially that is by winning a particular tournament. I think it was called Motorball. Let's call it Motorball. I am not sure. I'm screwing up the name right now. So, there's that. And it's this high-speed, cybernetic roller derby with weapons. That's essentially it. And, of course, very high speed. However, Salem dumps its trash down on the world of Earth. And there's this huge scrap heap. And scavengers go there to look for, well, cybernetic parts and other junk. And one of these people, I think his name was... Anyway, there's this doctor who goes to explore the scrap heap, and he finds the remains of this girl cyborg in the middle of the trash. Just a head and a bit of the torso and nothing more. And he decides to rebuild her. He happens to have a body laying around. Gee, I wonder where that came from. Anyway, he restores her and wakes the girl up. And it turns out that she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know what the taste of food, for example. She doesn't know who she is, where she came from, or how she got on that scrap heap. So that's basically the premise of the story. Now, from that point on, there are essentially a few arcs. One is the girl growing up story, because Alita is essentially a teenager in a fully cybernetic body. Only her brain is the only biological component she has, I think. So there's that. And of course, she needs to discover who she is. So there's also, getting to know oneself story. And then there is this love story going on. She meets this boy. She gathers stuff for the doctor from time to time, like body parts. He also has an arc both in the manga. It's very similar to what happens in the manga. And, well, what you can expect. They fall in love. And so there's that plot to be leveled out. I don't want to spoil anything, so I cannot say how that fully develops. Let's just say that he too gets a redemptive arc. And then we have the arc of the Doctor as well. He too has to keep secrets from her, for what she is, where she came from, what he believes she is, but also his own secret life. He has to do in order to keep his clinic running, because he is a philanthropist. So, and that makes him also very, very much stand out in the manga, very much, because the people in this world are truly horrible creatures. It's really one of those really dark manga, like everyone is terrible, everyone's criminal. Anyway, and that makes him stand out a lot more. The society is really toned down in that regard. It is not the hellscape of the original Battle Angel. The violence has also been tuned down, especially there is very little blood. Very little blood. And if there is blood, it's often blue, because, well, they're cyborgs. I don't know if that's the case in the manga. I don't recall that to be the case. Of course, the mangas were mostly black and white, and the anime just filled with red blood. So, if you are a gore hound and you are like, Battle Angel Alita, no, you're not gonna encounter much of that. As far as the violence, well, it's mostly fights between cyborgs. Very well done cyborgs, very well done fights, very well choreographed and timed. There is, of course, because there is this rotor ball or motorball tournament going on as well in the background. Later on in the story, you get these very high-speed fights. Like, they're going like 100 miles an hour, and meanwhile they're trying to kill each other with buzzsaws, chains, claws, and you name it. There is just an implication. Like, Battle Angel Alita, despite it being a teenage girl, is, like, brutal. The manga is truly brutal. And there is this scene involving a dog, and the thing I found very interesting is there's of course a lot more to the background of many of the cyborgs she fights in the manga. They really toned that down, probably because it's just too fucking nasty, like truly nasty, disturbing stuff. Kind of what you expect from Japanese manga, really. So I guess you could say that George Cameron really toned it down for the Western audience. That I don't think a lot of people would have appreciated all the disturbing imagery and descriptions that are present in the manga. So I don't think it's. I will not put any complaints there. So there's that, but there are these hints to certain scenes for people who are familiar with the anime and the manga. You can see certain things moving in the background. It's like, hey, wait, I recognize that from somewhere. And the dog scene. If you are familiar with the anime, you immediately know what I'm talking about, because there. I don't really want to go too much in spoilers on this one, but there's this scene in the anime and both the manga where a dog dies just horribly. And the manga of Alita is like, no one just dies. Everyone dies with lots of gore. People just get mangled. And yeah, as far as the story, I think I already see a comment in the chat section. Yeah, people only talk about how revolutionary CGI is, and I understand perfectly why. Because, well, there are a lot of disturbing elements to the manga. And you cannot translate that well to a it's like trying to sell Dead Alive to a mainstream audience. Like horror fans love the movie. Hell, there are horror fans who say Dead Alive is even too much for them. You cannot do that. And Battle Angel Alita has something very similar going on. You just can't translate that well to mainstream film. So much of the story in the film is really just focused on the love story, essentially. Very focused on, the coming of age, Alita discovering her past, which is, well, that's really just a side story. It's more about the love story. No, there's no real definition of, like, who she is. And what she is told visually. Like, she is effectively a very violent individual, and that is not much elaborated upon. It's just she kind of accepts that. Well, actually, I'm a really violent individual who lost a fight, and if there's no conflict, I'll find one. And that is essentially the core of her, the dark side of her character that is explored. And it's kind of a weird message for a Western audience. Like, it's treated like, okay, this is the natural state of things. I'm a violent thing. My new body is called the Berserker, for example. She just accepts that. She wants that. She wants that life. And that separates her from much of the Western character tropes, because we're like, oh, violence is not the way, we gotta fight or violent nature, the evil demons. And Alita, on the other hand, is, no, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, well, I'll snap your neck. Now, she's not evil, she's not a sociopath. Well, depends on your definition of sociopath, but she's not a evil person. This is a plot about her previous life that's explored in Mars Chronicles, where, well, she is not that person anymore. And there is obvious sequel bait in this film. There are like, I think the original series was like 30 issues, so you cannot put that in a film. So they focused on the same plot of the anime from the 90s. And, well, if you have seen that one, you pretty much know the general stretch of the plot in this movie as well. It's pretty much the same thing. But the way it is done is very well. I like the Alita in this film. I really do. It's like in beginnings, he's like this teenager who has a very strong will. She, the doctor who found her, she treats her like his daughter. He takes responsibility for her and he wants to protect her, which is, an obvious reaction. But she doesn't have that because she is not a little girl. She's not even a teenager in a strict sense. So it's obvious that she wants to do her own thing. And she does. And that path leads her to violence. And that's the path she wants. This is, it's not like a Frodo character that's like, oh, I don't want to kill anyone. She's not, no. And, I like the violence. I like defeating people. I like beating people to a pulp. And that makes her very alien from most audiences. There is no morality going on there. There is, of course, even the doctor submits to that. Like, in the end, it's like, no, I don't want you to do all this. And then it's like, well, I've given up. And, you do you. And that involves beating the hell out of a lot of cyborgs. So I think that's a very important observation to have here. As for the love story, it's, well, very typical. Actually, there's even some really heavy-handed symbolism going there. I'm not sure if that particular scene happens in the manga, but it's essentially a really heavy-handed symbolism where she hands the boy she's in love with her heart. Remember, she's a cyborg. She can do that. And, of course, very heavy-handed symbolism. Very powerful, a very powerful character moment for that boy, I would say. Because, it really shows... it kind of shows who he wants to be and the kind of life he wants to have, the kind of person he wants to be. So it's not like, okay, that was just a purposely heavy-handed scene, but it was a good character moment. I will say that, and well, that's his arc. He wants to be, by the end of the day, he wants to be a better person, and. I don't want to go into, for the people who know the story already know what will happen, but I don't want to go into it to the people who haven't yet, because there might be a surprise. I guess what I expected and what I didn't hear, because of course there are controversies about, people thought her body was too feminine. Well, if that's your opinion, whatever. But what I have not heard anyone comment on is the gender reversal in the relationship where, it's the boy who typically is the savior, and now the Alita is, well, the man in the relationship, so to speak. Because, once again, she's a very strong-willed character, and this is reflected not just in her arguments with the doctor, but also with her boyfriend. So that's a very interesting dynamic, but yet I have not heard anyone comment on that. Well, maybe that's just the zeitgeist. Let's see. Any comments? He kept it child-friendly. Kinda. Because there's still that scene with the dog, though. Even though it's not as brutal as with the anime. Let's see. Yeah, and I agree. He did to reach a broader audience. And Well, let's talk about the sequel bait. I think this is a good moment to talk about the sequel bait because the story is not done. As far as sequel bait endings go, I thought I was satisfied. I was not disappointed by this, and it was obvious it could only end that way. So, will there be a second Alita movie? Well, at this moment, I hope so. But I hope they saved the moment of self-discovery for the second film. And it kind of feels that way to me. That there might be a director's cut in the future that has a lot more of the background information on this character. Like, I think she has like 3 flashback scenes right now in the movie, and it feels to me there should have been more. But as the movie is now, I don't think it would have added a lot. So there probably will be a director's cut with a lot more flashbacks, but I think it will have. If they would have included those, it would have dragged the movie down. Because the pacing of the film is very well done. With Mortal Engines, the pacing, especially in the beginning, was like very high here, and then you get bombarded with all types of information of the movie. And in Alita, it's it's kind of like that thing I talked about, the low concept versus high concept issue with steampunk. Where people think of a cool high concept idea and then instead they focus completely on the characters. And Alita is essentially a love story in a post-apocalyptic world, and that's so you get this weird. I wouldn't say weird. It doesn't feel weird, but when you think about it, you have like all the high concept ideas of cybernetization and cybernetic blood sports and the segregation between the destroyed Earth and the high class Elysium. And on the one hand, you just have the love story, and that's really where the focus is of this film. The plot really focuses about their relationship of the boy and the girl, and there's some. And then they just tossed in some high concept arcs in between that also serve the love plot. So that's interesting, and I don't think it's much different in the manga, by the way, because when it comes to high concept ideas, there's just not that much to it. Alita is a gore fest extravaganza. It has a lot of blood and guts, a lot of cybernetic parts, a lot of cyborgs getting torn apart, and of course Alita doing a lot of over-the-top moves and stuff. And I really have to compliment the movie for this, by the way. I really like the anime feel of the fights. One of the reasons that James Cameron waited so long with making this movie, because he apparently wants to make this movie like forever. But one of the reasons was like, okay, the technology isn't ready for it. And the way how the technology, the CGI was implemented, like the style, it feels really like, okay, you are watching the manga in action. Like, with all the vignettes, all the sparks, the close-up of the weapons, the moves, the positioning of Alita in comparison to weapons getting thrown at her. It really feels like they animated a manga rather than that they redid the anime. It's really well done. It's like something the guys who did the horrible Dragon Ball Z movie could only, imagine and look at it all like, oh, that's how you do that? But no, Alita has that manga feel so well. I'm trying to recall, have I ever seen an anime or manga remake that has that? Like, Berserk is right now the only one I can really think of where I recognize the images, the panels back into the animation. but it really feels like, okay, well, this is just a scene where they try to copy a panel, and here they really brought those panels to life. I think that's the thing I wanted to come to. So that's magnificent. Let's see. Oh, now I have an official clip of Bonsard saying I like beating people to a pulp. Well, I hope you're happy with that. Those are all the comments for tonight. So would I recommend watching the movie? Yes, I would recommend it. But be prepared, it's more of a spectacle film. The moments in the love story were good. I thought they were good. But I don't know if this is a movie that will stay with me, because the action, especially with the rollerball thing, just gets so fast-paced. But what it does well, it does well. I don't think it makes it very memorable, so I'm really curious, will they make a second film? Because I don't know about you, I saw very little promotion for this film. I saw some trailers on YouTube go by, some people shared it on Facebook, and that's it. Mortal Engines got a lot more promotion. So yes, solid recommendation. Yes, I hope there will be a sequel, but it's generally a movie. I watched it in IMAX, and one of the things that bother me with movies today is they seem to be specially made for IMAX. So I don't know if they'll make good DVD movies. Well, and that was the final thing I wanted to say. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, as always, make it your way. Good night.